What if the real story behind America's founding father involves secrets of espionage, private struggles with political divisions, and a presidency that set traditions still followed today, all while confronting the moral dilemma of slavery? In this video, you will uncover Washington's journey from his appointment as commander through the Yorktown campaign to his unanimous election. We will delve into his economic foundations, the Whiskey Rebellion crisis, and his final years at Mount Vernon, revealing the man behind the symbol. George Washington was born in 1732 at Pope's Creek, Virginia. He came from a family of prosperous planters. His formal education was limited, ending around age 15. This early conclusion to schooling was common for Virginia gentry of that period. He then studied practical subjects like mathematics and surveying. These skills would prove foundational for his future career. Washington began working as a surveyor for Culpeper County in his late teens. This profession provided him intimate knowledge of the Virginia frontier. His work brought him into contact with the powerful Fairfax family. This connection was highly influential. Through them, he gained access to valuable opportunities and land. He acquired substantial property through these early surveys. Following the death of his half-brother Lawrence, Washington inherited Mount Vernon in 1752. This estate would become his lifelong home. His early experiences surveying frontier lands shaped his understanding of the American West. Research has shown this exposure was critical for his later military and political roles. He developed a reputation for reliability and ambition during these formative years, firmly establishing his place among Virginia's colonial elite. Yet this promising start among Virginia's elite would soon be tested by circumstances far removed from colonial society's comforts. George Washington's first military command was a tense and perilous undertaking. In his early 20s, he served as a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia militia. His mission involved confronting French forces in the strategically vital Ohio Valley. This assignment placed him at the heart of the opening clashes of the French and Indian War. The young officer's resolve was about to be tested in fire. A pivotal early engagement was the Battle of Fort Necessity in July 1754. Washington's small, hastily constructed fort was overwhelmed by a superior French and Native American force. After a full day of intense fighting in a driving rainstorm, he was compelled to surrender. Crucially, the surrender document he signed, written in French, contained an admission of assassinating a French officer, a claim he later denied he understood. This defeat was a harsh but formative lesson in diplomacy and the fog of war. Washington further honed his skills as an aide to British General Edward Braddock. During the disastrous expedition to capture Fort Duquesne in 1755, the British column was ambushed. General Braddock was mortally wounded, and the ranks dissolved into chaos. Washington exhibited remarkable courage, helping to organize a retreat while having 2 horses shot from under him and his coat pierced by multiple musket balls. This experience provided him an invaluable, close-up view of European linear tactics failing against guerrilla warfare. These early defeats forged his understanding of logistics, frontier combat, and resilient leadership, lessons that would prove indispensable decades later. These hard-won lessons in leadership and unconventional warfare would soon make Washington the obvious choice when the colonies needed a commander who understood both the realities of combat and the demands of a protracted struggle. George Washington married Martha Dandridge Custis in January 1759. She was a wealthy widow with 2 young children. The marriage transformed Washington's social and financial standing almost overnight. He gained control of a substantial fortune, including land and enslaved people, which made him one of Virginia's wealthiest planters. The couple settled at Mount Vernon, which Washington was expanding from a modest farmhouse into a grand estate. Their life there centered on managing the large plantation. Washington became a stepfather to Martha's 2 children, John Parke Custis and Martha Parke Custis. He took his responsibilities seriously, overseeing their education and managing their inheritance. Tragically, his stepdaughter, Patsy, died as a teenager during an epileptic seizure in 1773. His relationship with his stepson, Jackie, was more complex, as Jackie often resisted his stepfather's disciplined expectations. The family faced these personal losses while Washington's public duties grew. Washington's long absences, first during the Revolutionary War and later for his presidency, placed a significant strain on family life. Martha Washington spent many winters at military camps during the war, sharing in the hardships with her husband. However, research has shown these prolonged separations meant Mount Vernon was often managed through letters. Their surviving correspondence reveals a relationship built on deep mutual respect and partnership. While they had no children together, their union created a stable family foundation that endured through decades of public service and private challenges. Yet this partnership, so carefully maintained across distances, would be matched by a presence that was equally impossible to ignore. George Washington possessed a physical stature that immediately commanded attention. Standing approximately 6 feet 2 inches tall, he was exceptionally large for his era. His frame was powerful, a testament to his years as a surveyor and soldier. This impressive height and strength contributed significantly to an aura of natural authority. Contemporaries frequently described his presence as dignified and imposing, making him a focal point in any room he entered. Accounts from his peers, such as those from the Marquis de Lafayette, noted his calm and reserved social manner. He was not a loud or overly demonstrative man. Instead, his power was conveyed through a composed and serious demeanor. Research into personal letters has shown that many found his quiet self-control more intimidating than any outburst. This restraint became a key component of his leadership persona, suggesting a man of deep thought and unshakable resolve. His appearance was integral to his public image. His tall, robust figure visually embodied the strength and stability desired for the new nation. The combination of his physical grandeur and his controlled behavior created a powerful symbol. Analysis has revealed that this carefully managed presence helped cement his role as the unifying father of the country, a leader whose very look inspired confidence and respect in his followers and foreign dignitaries alike. Yet behind this carefully constructed public image lay a man whose private world revealed a strikingly different dimension of his character. Beyond his public duties, George Washington cultivated rich private interests that shaped his character and legacy. His passion for farming was particularly profound. At Mount Vernon, he transformed his estate into an experimental agricultural hub. Washington meticulously rotated crops like wheat and corn, introduced novel fertilizers, and bred new animal breeds. He even designed an innovative 16-sided treading barn to improve grain processing. This dedication stemmed from a belief that agricultural advancement was vital for the nation's prosperity. Washington also enjoyed the pursuits of a Virginia gentleman. He was an avid fox hunter, maintaining a pack of hounds and participating in the social rituals of the chase. Architecture captivated him as well. He oversaw the expansion and redesign of Mount Vernon, creating the iconic piazza with its panoramic view of the Potomac River. His personal copy of Palladio's architectural treatise was heavily annotated, revealing his deep engagement with design principles. His life was not all work and solitude. Washington had a great appreciation for theater and social entertainment. He frequently attended plays in cities like Philadelphia and New York. At Mount Vernon, he and Martha Washington were renowned for their hospitality, hosting numerous dinners and gatherings. Diaries from guests often noted the lively conversation and generous atmosphere, illustrating how these social bonds were integral to his world, balancing his more solitary agricultural passions. Yet these refined social graces would soon be tested against the brutal demands of a conflict that required a completely different kind of strategy. George Washington fundamentally reshaped European military doctrine to fit American revolutionary realities. While trained in conventional 18th century warfare, he quickly recognized its limitations against the superior British forces. The vast American terrain and limited resources of the Continental Army demanded innovation. Consequently, Washington began integrating elements of irregular guerrilla tactics with traditional line formations. This hybrid approach proved essential for survival and eventual victory. His adaptation was a direct response to early defeats. The disastrous Battle of Long Island in 1776 demonstrated the peril of engaging the British in open, European-style combat. Research has shown this defeat was a pivotal learning moment. Washington subsequently prioritized preserving his army over holding territory. He embraced strategic retreats and leveraged his forces' knowledge of the local landscape. This allowed for surprise attacks and rapid withdrawals that harassed and exhausted the enemy. One of the most effective syntheses of these methods was the campaign leading to the victory at Trenton in late 1776. After a long retreat, Washington executed a daring nighttime crossing of the Delaware River. His forces surprised and captured nearly 1,000 Hessian mercenaries. This operation combined the precise timing of a conventional military maneuver with the surprise element of guerrilla warfare. Analysis has revealed this victory was crucial for restoring morale and proving the viability of his strategic evolution. Washington's ability to learn and adapt ultimately forged a new, effective model of warfare for the new nation. This strategic evolution extended beyond the battlefield, as Washington also mastered the art of gathering information long before any engagement. George Washington recognized early that battlefield victories required more than muskets. He built sophisticated intelligence networks that became his invisible weapon. One of the most famous was the Culper Ring, established in 1778. This secret spy cell operated in British-occupied New York. Its members, including Abraham Woodwell and Robert Townsend, used coded messages and invisible ink. They relayed critical information on British troop movements and plans directly to Washington. This clandestine work proved decisive. In 1780, the Culper Ring uncovered a British plot to ambush the newly arriving French fleet. Washington used this intelligence to prepare defenses, saving a vital ally. Another key operation involved a double agent, Benedict Arnold. His attempted betrayal of the West Point fort was discovered through intercepted correspondence. This prevented a catastrophic loss for the Continental Army. Washington's espionage efforts extended beyond this single ring. He employed numerous individual spies and scouts across the colonies. They gathered details on enemy supply lines and morale. This constant stream of information allowed Washington to make strategic decisions with remarkable precision. Historians note that his effective use of intelligence was a key factor in outmaneuvering a superior British force. As one analyst wrote, Washington was not just a general, he was a spy master. His shadow war of information gathering fundamentally shaped the path to American independence. But Washington's influence extended beyond the battlefield, shaping the very structure of the new nation he helped create. George Washington envisioned a balanced federal government with a strong executive at its helm. His interpretation of presidential powers under the new Constitution was both expansive and restrained. He believed the president must possess sufficient authority to act decisively, yet remain clearly bound by the nation's foundational law. This philosophy was evident from the very beginning of his administration starting in 1789. He carefully navigated his relations with the legislative and judicial branches, understanding that their independence was crucial for the system to function. His actions established critical precedents for executive leadership. For instance, he asserted the president's sole authority in conducting foreign policy and commanding the military. However, he also recognized the limits of his power. He consistently deferred to Congress on matters of lawmaking and treasury, refusing to overstep his constitutional role. When the Supreme Court issued its first major rulings, Washington accepted its authority to interpret the law, thereby reinforcing the judiciary's co-equal status. Analysis of his private writings and public statements reveals a leader deeply committed to this equilibrium. He wrote about the dangers of any single branch becoming too dominant. Some scholars argue his restraint was a product of his character, while others point to his pragmatic understanding of political power. His careful navigation set a standard for his successors, creating a model of a powerful but constitutionally constrained presidency that has endured for more than 2 centuries. This constitutional restraint naturally reinforced his broader vision for the nation, leading him to champion a cause that would define his entire legacy. George Washington made national unity his central political priority throughout his public life. He consistently argued that regional interests must be secondary to the strength of the entire nation. His famous farewell address in 1796 encapsulated this belief, warning explicitly against the dangers of geographical factions and party spirit. To understand the diverse perspectives within the young republic, Washington embarked on ambitious tours of the nation. In 1789, he traveled through New England, and later, he journeyed through the southern states. These trips were not merely ceremonial. Research has shown he used them to gauge local economies, build personal relationships with community leaders, and listen to the concerns of ordinary citizens from different regions. This first-hand commitment to a national perspective directly shaped his presidential decisions. For instance, his determination to suppress the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794 was driven by the need to assert federal authority over local insurrection, thereby preserving the Union. Furthermore, analysts note that his insistence on neutrality in foreign wars between Britain and France was a strategic choice to prevent the young nation from being torn apart by internal divisions along pro-British or pro-French lines. Washington's vision was clear: a unified America, bound by a shared federal government, was the only path to long-term stability and independence. His actions consistently reflected this principle, setting a foundational precedent for all his successors. In June 1775, the Second Continental Congress faced a monumental decision. They needed a commander-in-chief for the nascent Continental Army, a force opposing the world's most powerful military. The choice was far from simple, with several experienced officers in contention. Yet the delegates turned to a 43-year-old Virginian planter and veteran of the French and Indian War. George Washington's selection was a masterstroke of political and military calculation. Why was he chosen over other candidates like John Hancock or Artemus Ward? Historical analysis reveals a combination of factors. Washington possessed significant military experience from the previous conflict. Furthermore, his physical presence and dignified character inspired immense confidence. Crucially, appointing a Virginian signaled a unified national commitment, bridging the gap between New England and the southern colonies. He was seen as a man who could unite the colonies. Upon his appointment on June 15th, Washington delivered a brief but profound acceptance speech. He expressed deep humility, famously declaring, "I do not think myself equal to the command I am honored with." He also refused a salary, asking only for reimbursement of his expenses, a move that cemented his image as a selfless patriot. His immediate challenges were staggering. He inherited a disorganized militia, desperately short of trained soldiers, gunpowder, and supplies. The task of forging this group into a professional army capable of defeating the British seemed nearly impossible, setting the stage for an epic struggle. Yet against these overwhelming odds, an unexpected breakthrough would soon emerge, only to be followed by even greater trials. Following his appointment, Washington faced immense challenges in the early war years. The successful siege of Boston in the spring of 1776 forced a British evacuation, providing a crucial morale boost. However, this victory was soon overshadowed by a series of devastating setbacks. Washington moved his army to New York, anticipating a major British attack. His forces, however, were outnumbered and outmaneuvered in the battles of Long Island and Manhattan. These defeats forced a desperate retreat across New Jersey, with the Continental Army shrinking through desertions and expiring enlistments. The Revolutionary cause teetered on the brink of collapse by the winter of 1776. Thomas Paine famously captured the mood of the crisis, writing in The American Crisis, "These are the times that try men's souls." The British Army pursued Washington's dwindling force relentlessly, aiming to crush the rebellion in a single decisive campaign. Washington's strategic position appeared hopeless. His army, which had numbered around 20,000 men months before, was reduced to a mere few thousand wary, ill-equipped soldiers. Historians note that Washington's leadership during this retreat was pivotal. He managed to keep his army intact, avoiding a final, catastrophic battle that could have ended the war. His decision to cross the ice-choked Delaware River on Christmas night was an act of sheer desperation that would become legendary. This daring maneuver led to a surprise attack on the Hessian garrison in Trenton, a victory that provided a desperately needed spark of hope and helped to revive the faltering patriot cause at its darkest hour. But that single spark of hope would soon be tested by the harsh realities of a bitter winter and an army on the verge of dissolution. The bleak winter of 1776 found the Continental Army in a state of near collapse. After a series of demoralizing defeats and retreats, George Washington faced a crisis. His army, dwindling and despondent, saw enlistments set to expire at year's end. He needed a decisive victory, not just to hold his force together, but to prove the revolution still lived. His gaze fell upon Trenton, New Jersey, where a garrison of Hessian mercenaries was stationed. On the night of December 25th, Washington executed an audacious plan. Through a fierce winter storm of sleet and snow, he led 2,400 men across the ice-choked Delaware River. The crossing, which began after dark, took far longer than anticipated, leaving the force behind schedule and exposed. Yet this very adversity provided cover. As one historian noted, the Hessian commander, Colonel Johann Roll, dismissed the possibility of an attack in such dreadful conditions. Washington's strategic genius lay in this calculated risk, attacking when the enemy felt most secure during their Christmas celebrations. The surprise at dawn on December 26th was total. The Continental forces, many with feet wrapped in rags, marched 9 miles to Trenton and launched a coordinated assault from multiple directions. The battle was short and fierce, lasting less than 90 minutes. The Americans achieved a stunning victory, capturing nearly 900 Hessian soldiers with minimal losses of their own. This triumph was not merely a tactical success. It single-handedly revived the flagging morale of the colonies, injecting new hope and purpose into the cause. Recruits flocked to the army, and the momentum of the war shifted irrevocably. The victory at Trenton proved Washington's army could strike a powerful blow, transforming a rebellion on the brink of extinction into a resilient and credible fighting force. This newfound strength and resolve would soon be tested by one of the war's most grueling trials. The winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge was a period of extreme hardship for the Continental Army. Soldiers faced a desperate struggle for survival against the brutal Pennsylvania cold. Research has shown that inadequate supplies of food, clothing, and shelter created a crisis that threatened to dissolve the revolutionary force. The army's very existence hung in the balance. Food shortages were severe and constant. The typical ration was a simple fire cake, a tasteless mix of flour and water cooked over an open fire. Analysis has revealed that disease, particularly typhoid and dysentery, ravaged the malnourished and weakened soldiers. Historians estimate nearly 2,000 men perished from illness and exposure during the encampment. Shelter was equally primitive, with thousands of soldiers crammed into crude log huts they built themselves. These structures offered little protection from the freezing temperatures and heavy snowfall. Clothing was desperately scarce, leaving many without proper shoes or warm coats. One soldier wrote, "My feet and legs froze till they were black, and it was often necessary to amputate them." Despite this suffering, General George Washington's leadership was pivotal. He remained with his troops, sharing their privations and working tirelessly to secure supplies. His presence and unwavering resolve became a cornerstone of morale. While some officers despaired, Washington's steadfastness helped forge the dispirited militia into a more disciplined and resilient professional army, a transformation crucial for the victories that would follow. Yet this hard-won resilience would soon face its ultimate test as the army confronted the monumental task of transforming its very structure. Following the harsh winter encampment, the Continental Army faced a critical need for professionalization. In early 1778, General George Washington appointed the Prussian-born Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben as the Army's Inspector General. His arrival marked a pivotal moment in American military history. Von Steuben immediately recognized the undisciplined state of the forces and initiated a comprehensive transformation. He did not simply impose European doctrines, he adapted them for the American soldier, creating a single, cohesive system of drill and maneuver. The core of his reform was the creation of a standardized training regimen. Von Steuben personally drilled a model company at Valley Forge, teaching them precise marching, rapid musket firing, and the proficient use of the bayonet. This model company then trained other units, creating a cascading effect of discipline and skill. His methods were compiled into the Blue Book, officially titled Regulations for the Order and Discipline of the Troops of the United States. This manual provided a unified set of procedures for the entire army, from company-level drills to the duties of each officer rank. It effectively established a professional military structure where none had existed before. The results were profound and immediate. The army evolved from a loosely organized militia into a disciplined, coordinated fighting force. This newfound professionalism was first tested with great success at the Battle of Monmouth in June 1778. The soldiers demonstrated improved discipline under fire and executed complex maneuvers with a competence previously unseen. Historians widely agree that von Steuben's reforms were fundamental. They instilled the essential military discipline and tactical cohesion that prepared the Continental Army for its future victories, directly contributing to the ultimate success of the American Revolution. While this internal transformation was essential, the Continental Army's prospects would soon be dramatically reshaped by a powerful external force. The crucial French alliance fundamentally transformed the American Revolutionary War. Following the pivotal American victory at Saratoga in 1777, France formally recognized the United States and entered the war against Britain the following year. This partnership provided immense financial subsidies and military supplies, which were desperately needed by the struggling Continental Army. French naval power also emerged as a decisive factor, challenging Britain's long-standing dominance at sea and forcing it to divert resources globally. General George Washington's strategic thinking evolved significantly with this new alliance. He recognized that defeating the British required a combined operation, coordinating his land forces with the French Navy. This complex coordination culminated at the Siege of Yorktown in 1781. Washington skillfully orchestrated a march south, joining with French ground troops under General Rochambeau. Simultaneously, a French fleet under Admiral de Grasse secured the Chesapeake Bay, successfully blocking British reinforcements or escape by sea. This international cooperation dramatically strengthened the American position. The presence of seasoned French soldiers and officers provided valuable training and bolstered morale. Historians note that the financial support, amounting to millions of livres, was essential for paying and supplying the troops. The Franco-American victory at Yorktown effectively ended major combat operations. As one historian wrote, the alliance made victory possible, highlighting how European support was indispensable for securing American independence. But how exactly did this decisive victory at Yorktown come to be orchestrated? The Yorktown campaign represented the masterstroke of the American Revolutionary War. In the summer of 1781, General George Washington orchestrated a brilliant deception. While maintaining the appearance of a siege against British forces in New York City, he secretly began moving a significant portion of the Continental Army south. This force, combined with French troops under General Rochambeau, embarked on a rapid march covering hundreds of miles to Virginia. Their objective was to trap the army of General Charles Cornwallis, which had entrenched itself at the small port of Yorktown. Washington's plan hinged on precise coordination with the French Navy. A fleet under Admiral de Grasse successfully sailed from the West Indies and defeated a British naval squadron in the Battle of the Chesapeake. This crucial naval victory sealed the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, preventing Cornwallis from escaping by sea or receiving reinforcements. Simultaneously, Washington's allied armies completed their land march, forming a tight semicircular siege line around the British positions on land. By late September, the noose was firmly tightened. The siege of Yorktown commenced in earnest. Allied engineers directed the digging of elaborate trench lines that crept ever closer to the British defenses. A relentless artillery bombardment from both land and sea pounded the British fortifications day and night. A series of successful assaults on key British redoubts further weakened their perimeter. Trapped and under constant fire, Cornwallis found his situation increasingly hopeless. An attempted escape across the York River was thwarted by a violent storm. With supplies dwindling and no hope of relief, General Cornwallis had no choice. On October 19, 1781, he formally surrendered his entire army of over 7,000 men. The surrender ceremony was a profound moment. The British bands reportedly played a tune titled "The World Turned Upside Down," a fitting reflection of the event's monumental significance. This decisive victory at Yorktown effectively ended major combat operations and compelled the British government to negotiate for peace, ultimately leading to American independence. Yet with the ink barely dry on the treaty, the monumental task of forging a stable nation from the ideals of revolution began. The guns fell silent in 1783, but a far more insidious battle for America's future began. The new nation, operating under the fragile Articles of Confederation, teetered on the brink of collapse. The central government was a phantom, powerless to tax, regulate commerce, or enforce its own laws. States bickered over borders and trade, creating a patchwork of conflicting interests. The dream of a unified republic seemed to be dissolving into 13 separate squabbles. George Washington, the revered commander, returned to his Mount Vernon estate. Yet, he watched the unfolding national crisis with profound anxiety. In his correspondence, he expressed deep fears that the Union was a half-starved, limping government. He saw the states acting like selfish children, ignoring the greater good. His greatest dread was that the hard-won independence would be lost to internal discord and European manipulation. The hero was home, but his mind was consumed by the nation's fragile state. This growing turmoil set the stage for the Annapolis Convention in 1786. While only 5 states sent delegates, its outcome was pivotal. Washington, though not present, was a powerful symbolic force behind the gathering. The convention's report, largely drafted by Alexander Hamilton, diagnosed the embarrassments of the national government. It boldly called for a new convention in Philadelphia the following year to revise the articles. This was the crucial first step. Analysis has shown this meeting transformed the discourse from fixing the existing system to creating an entirely new one, a path that would inevitably lead back to Washington's leadership, with the stage set for a fundamental transformation of government. Attention now turned to the single figure whose authority could unite the divided delegates. George Washington's role as the presiding officer of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, beginning in May of 1787, was far more than ceremonial. His immense personal prestige, earned as the victorious commander of the Continental Army, provided immediate legitimacy to the contentious gathering. Many delegates were deeply suspicious of creating a stronger central government. Yet Washington's presence reassured them that the process was in trustworthy hands. Historians note that his mere attendance signaled the convention's critical importance, encouraging participation from key states and figures who might otherwise have remained distant. As president of the convention, Washington exercised a quiet but profoundly influential form of leadership. He spoke very rarely during the floor debates, understanding that his position required impartiality. Instead, his authority was felt through his dignified demeanor and his careful management of the proceedings. He ensured that every delegate had an opportunity to be heard, fostering an environment where difficult compromises could be negotiated. For instance, during the most heated arguments between large and small states over representation, his steady hand helped guide the delegates toward the Great Compromise, which created the bicameral Congress we know today. Research has shown that Washington's restraint was a deliberate and highly effective strategy. By not advocating for specific proposals from the chair, he avoided alienating any faction and maintained his role as a unifying symbol. His few interventions were strategically timed to break deadlocks or to urge patience and moderation. One delegate observed that Washington's silence was more powerful than the speeches of other men. This approach was crucial in steering the convention through 4 long months of debate, ultimately producing a finished constitution that, while not perfect, established a durable framework for the United States government. Yet this masterful display of restraint would soon culminate in a political outcome so complete it had never been seen before. In early 1789, every single presidential elector cast their vote for George Washington. This unanimous election was an unprecedented act of national unity. The new nation placed its complete trust in one man. Washington learned of his victory at Mount Vernon with characteristic humility. He then began the long journey to New York City, the temporary capital. His trip became a celebratory procession through cheering crowds. Arriving in New York, Washington faced the monumental task of building a government from nothing. There were no precedents, no established departments, and no clear rules of operation. Every decision would set a crucial standard for the future. The entire framework for executive power had to be invented and implemented without delay. This immense challenge required both wisdom and caution. On April 30th, 1789, Washington delivered his inaugural address at Federal Hall. He expressed his deep anxiety about his new duties, famously calling himself a citizen who felt unpracticed in the civil role. He pledged to serve without salary, asking only for the reimbursement of his expenses. For his cabinet, he appointed key figures to lead the nascent government. These included Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury and Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. These appointments brought formidable, though often conflicting, talents into his administration to tackle the nation's pressing financial and diplomatic issues. With these key appointments in place, Washington now turned his attention to defining the very structure and traditions of the executive branch itself. Upon assuming the presidency, George Washington immediately began shaping the office through a series of deliberate actions. He understood that the Constitution provided only a basic framework. His first major step was creating the cabinet system. In 1789, he appointed Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State and Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury. This established the precedent of a president seeking advice from a group of trusted department heads. This system became a cornerstone of the American executive branch, allowing for specialized counsel on complex national issues. Washington also carefully defined the presidency's relationship with Congress. He believed in a strong executive, but also respected legislative authority. He established the practice of reporting to Congress on the state of the Union, as the Constitution mandated. However, he decided to deliver this address in person, a tradition that lasted until Woodrow Wilson's administration. Furthermore, he asserted executive authority in foreign policy. His Neutrality Proclamation of 1793, issued without a congressional declaration, established the president's primary role in conducting foreign affairs. This set a powerful precedent for presidential power in international relations. Perhaps his most enduring legacy was his voluntary decision to leave office. After 2 terms, he refused to run for a third, despite immense public support. This established the 2-term tradition, an unwritten rule followed by every subsequent president for nearly a century and a half. His farewell address, published in 1796, was not just a personal goodbye but a foundational document. In it, he counseled against permanent alliances and the dangers of political parties. This peaceful transfer of power was a radical act in an era of monarchies. It cemented the principle that the presidency was a temporary trust, not a lifetime possession. These foundational choices created a resilient and limited executive office, defining its character for generations. Yet these political foundations would soon face their ultimate test when confronted with a far more immediate crisis brewing just beneath the surface. As president, George Washington faced immense economic challenges. The young nation carried substantial war debts and lacked a unified financial system. Washington turned to his brilliant Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, to craft a solution. Hamilton's ambitious financial plan, presented between 1790 and 1791, aimed to establish the nation's credit on a solid foundation. A central pillar was the assumption of state debts by the federal government. This controversial move consolidated over $21 million in state obligations into a single national debt. Hamilton argued this would bind the states more closely to the central government and demonstrate its financial reliability to foreign creditors. Washington strongly supported this vision, understanding that national stability required fiscal credibility. Another key element was the creation of the Bank of the United States. Chartered in 1791 for a term of 20 years, the bank was designed to facilitate government transactions, issue a stable currency, and provide loans to stimulate commerce. While some, like Thomas Jefferson, believed the bank was unconstitutional, Washington ultimately sided with Hamilton's broader interpretation of federal power. Research has shown that these policies were transformative. By funding the debt at par and establishing a reliable source of revenue through tariffs, the United States gained a strong credit rating in European markets. This allowed for new borrowing and investment, which fueled economic growth and secured the financial independence of the new republic, firmly establishing its economic foundations. Yet these very economic successes would soon expose fundamental disagreements about the nation's future direction. The political landscape of the young United States fractured dramatically in the 1790s. Two powerful figures, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, became the nuclei for opposing factions. Hamilton championed a strong central government and an industrial economy. Jefferson advocated for states' rights and an agrarian republic. Their conflict was not merely philosophical. It permeated President Washington's cabinet, creating a palpable tension in the nation's capital. Washington watched this schism with profound alarm. He deeply feared that organized political parties or factionalism would destroy the fragile union. His own administration became a battleground for these competing ideologies. Research has shown his primary goal was to maintain national unity above all else. He attempted to act as a mediator between his two secretaries, but their disagreements only intensified over time. The growing divide was a constant source of concern for the president. The French Revolution, beginning in 1789, poured fuel on the fire of American political divisions. The conflict between monarchical Britain and revolutionary France forced the United States to choose sides. Hamilton and his Federalists favored neutrality and stronger ties with Britain. Jefferson and his Democratic Republicans felt a deep ideological kinship with France. This foreign policy crisis hardened the emerging party lines, making Washington's plea for nonpartisan unity increasingly difficult to sustain. The nation was being pulled in two different directions, a tension that would define its political future. As these ideological tensions simmered, a more immediate domestic crisis would soon test the federal government's authority within its own borders. The Whiskey Rebellion erupted in 1794 as Western Pennsylvania farmers violently protested a federal excise tax on distilled spirits. Their resistance included tarring and feathering tax collectors and burning property. This direct challenge to federal authority threatened the stability of the young republic. President George Washington faced a critical test of the new government's power. Washington acted decisively to crush the insurrection. He issued a proclamation ordering the rebels to disperse and mobilized a militia force of nearly 13,000 men from 4 states. This was an unprecedented show of federal power, in a move that stunned the nation. The 62-year-old president personally led these troops into the field. For several weeks, he rode at the head of the army, the only sitting U.S. president to ever command troops in the field. His direct involvement demonstrated the immense seriousness of the situation. The rebellion collapsed without a major battle as the massive federal force advanced. Most rebels simply returned to their homes. This outcome powerfully established the federal government's authority to enforce its laws. Washington's response set crucial precedents for presidential power. It affirmed the executive's right to suppress internal uprisings. Furthermore, it demonstrated that the national government, not the states, held ultimate sovereignty. As one observer noted, the event proved the government could govern itself. This decisive action cemented Washington's legacy as a leader who ensured the survival of the constitutional order. The federal government had proven it would not tolerate armed resistance to its laws. But having secured domestic authority, how would Washington navigate the complex international arena? George Washington faced immense foreign policy pressure during his presidency. The young nation stood precariously between two European giants, Britain and France, who were frequently at war. Washington believed entanglement in these conflicts would be catastrophic for the fragile United States. His administration therefore pursued a firm policy of neutrality. This stance was immediately tested by the war between Britain and revolutionary France. British naval power posed the most direct threat. The Royal Navy seized American merchant ships and impressed American sailors into service. To avert a disastrous war, Washington sent Chief Justice John Jay to London. The resulting agreement, known as Jay's Treaty, was signed in 1795. It secured the withdrawal of British troops from northwestern forts and established limited trade terms. However, the treaty generated furious controversy at home. Many Americans saw it as a humiliating capitulation to their former oppressor. Critics argued it betrayed the French, America's revolutionary ally. Political opponents denounced Washington and Jay as monarchists. Despite the firestorm, Washington stood by the treaty. He believed it was a necessary, if imperfect, price for preserving peace and securing economic stability. His commitment to neutrality was further cemented in his farewell address in 1796. In that document, he famously counseled the nation to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. This principle of avoiding European conflicts would guide American foreign policy for more than a century. But what Washington could not have foreseen was how the very document containing this counsel would itself become a source of immense political tension. After 2 terms as president, George Washington made a momentous decision. He would not seek re-election in 1796. This choice established a crucial precedent for presidential term limits. Washington announced his retirement through his famous farewell address. It was published in a Philadelphia newspaper in September 1796. He expressed his gratitude to the nation and offered his final counsel. The address contained profound warnings for the young republic. Washington specifically cautioned against the dangers of political parties. He believed factionalism could create bitter divisions. Such divisions would weaken the national government. He argued that parties might allow small, cunning groups to seize control. This would undermine the will of the majority. His vision was for a nation united by common interests. Another key warning concerned foreign policy. Washington advised against permanent alliances with other nations. He favored temporary agreements based on current needs. Entangling alliances could draw America into unnecessary European conflicts. The nation needed time to consolidate its strength and independence. This principle guided American foreign policy for many decades. Research has shown its influence lasted well into the 20th century. The farewell address had a lasting impact on American political thought. It became a foundational text of American civic culture. For generations, it was read annually in Congress. Analysis has revealed its enduring themes of unity and independence. Washington's call for national unity above sectional interests remains relevant. His warnings about political partisanship still resonate in modern political discourse. The address cemented his legacy as a leader who prioritized the nation's future over personal power. Yet this champion of national unity would soon retreat from public life entirely, exchanging the political arena for the quiet rhythms of his private estate. After leaving the presidency in 1797, George Washington returned to his beloved Mount Vernon, embracing the life of a private gentleman and planter. His days followed a rigorous schedule beginning before sunrise. He devoted his mornings to correspondence and estate management, often writing dozens of letters. The afternoons were reserved for riding across his vast farms, personally inspecting every operation. This active supervision was central to his identity as a progressive agriculturalist. Washington transformed Mount Vernon into an experimental farm. He tested new crops like wheat and hemp, moving away from the soil-depleting tobacco. He also pioneered innovative rotation methods and designed a unique 16-sided treating barn to improve grain processing. His meticulous records show a constant quest for efficiency and self-sufficiency. These agricultural pursuits were not merely a hobby, They represented a practical application of the scientific principles he admired. Despite his official retirement, Washington remained a pivotal national figure. His home became a destination for visitors seeking counsel, and his mail included letters from prominent Americans on critical state matters. He maintained a vast correspondence offering advice on politics and national development. Historical analysis reveals his continued influence was quietly exerted through this steady stream of guidance, solidifying his role as the young nation's elder statesman until his final days. Yet this steady stream of guidance would soon be silenced, as the nation was about to face the profound and unexpected loss of its revered elder statesman. George Washington's sudden death on December 14, 1799, sent shockwaves through the young nation. After developing a severe throat infection, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Despite the efforts of his physicians, he passed away at his Mount Vernon estate. The news traveled slowly but ignited an unprecedented wave of national mourning. Communities from New England to the southern states organized solemn funeral processions. In many cities, businesses closed and church bells tolled for hours. Citizens wore black crepe armbands as a public display of grief. These ceremonies were not mandated by a central authority but arose spontaneously, demonstrating his profound personal stature. The nation collectively paused to honor its foundational leader. The official funeral at Mount Vernon was a somber, private affair, yet its symbolic weight was immense. During the Congressional Memorial Service, General Henry Lee delivered his iconic eulogy. He famously described Washington as, quote, "first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen," close quote. This phrase perfectly encapsulated the public sentiment and would echo through generations of American history. Analysis shows this national response helped solidify Washington's legacy beyond his political achievements. The mourning rituals transformed the man into a permanent symbol of national unity and Republican virtue. His death, while a moment of profound loss, ultimately cemented his image as the indispensable father of the United States, a figure whose influence would endure long after his passing. This profound legacy naturally raises the question of what specific leadership qualities enabled Washington to earn such enduring national reverence. George Washington demonstrated three essential leadership qualities throughout his career. His integrity was widely recognized by contemporaries and remains a cornerstone of his legacy. He consistently displayed sound judgment, particularly in military and political strategy. Furthermore, his perseverance was evident during the difficult winter at Valley Forge and the long years of the Revolutionary War. These characteristics combined to form a leader trusted by both soldiers and citizens. His military experience, spanning from the French and Indian War to the Revolutionary War, fundamentally shaped his presidential leadership. Commanding the Continental Army taught him the immense challenges of managing a fragile, decentralized nation. This practical understanding directly influenced his desire for a stronger federal government as president. He also learned the critical importance of civilian control over the military, a principle he upheld meticulously during his presidency. Contemporary assessments from figures like Thomas Jefferson praised his virtuous character and unwavering commitment. However, some critics pointed to his ownership of enslaved people as a significant moral contradiction. Modern analysis often highlights this complex duality. Scholars note that his leadership established crucial precedents for the peaceful transfer of power. Research has shown his ability to unify differing factions was vital for the new nation's survival. While some view him as an indispensable figure, others offer a more nuanced evaluation of his actions and their lasting impact. Yet these leadership achievements inevitably raise questions about how such foundational principles coexisted with the institution of slavery, leading us to a more troubling dimension of his legacy. George Washington's relationship with slavery remains one of the most contentious aspects of his legacy. At the time of his death, he enslaved over 300 individuals at his Mount Vernon estate. This fact creates a profound tension with his image as a champion of liberty. Research has shown his views on the institution were not static. Throughout his life, he expressed growing private discomfort with slavery, yet he depended on enslaved labor for his wealth and lifestyle. His final will, composed in 1799, contained extraordinary provisions. Washington mandated that the 123 enslaved people he directly owned be freed upon the death of his wife Martha. He further stipulated that the elderly among them be supported and that young people be taught to read and write. This act was unprecedented among the slave-owning founding fathers. However, it did not apply to the so-called dour slaves. who Martha Washington had inherited and whom she could not legally free. This complex decision ignited a historical debate that continues today. Some scholars argue his will demonstrates a significant moral evolution, a quiet rebellion against the system he helped build. They point to his correspondence, where he wrote of a desire to see a plan adopted for the gradual abolition of slavery. Others contend his actions were too little, too late. They emphasize that he chose to postpone freedom for his enslaved people during Martha's lifetime, a period that could have lasted for decades. Furthermore, his legal and financial decisions ensured the immediate separation of families between his freed slaves and the dour slaves who remained in bondage. This division highlights the immense gap between his revolutionary ideals and the harsh reality of his personal practices, leaving a deeply complicated and unresolved legacy. Yet even as this complex personal history remained unresolved, a parallel process was already underway that would transform this deeply flawed man into something far greater than the sum of his actions. During his lifetime, George Washington became the symbolic father of the nation through a deliberate process of image-making. Even before his presidency ended in 1797, artists and writers began crafting a national mythology around him. This effort transformed the victorious general and first president into an enduring personification of the young republic. His celebrated resignation of military power and his voluntary departure from the presidency cemented his image as a selfless Cincinnatus, a leader who rejected absolute power. This carefully managed persona made him a living symbol of republican virtue. The creation of the Washington myth was heavily influenced by early national art and culture. Painters like Gilbert Stuart produced iconic portraits, such as the Lansdowne portrait from 1796, which depicted Washington not as a king but as a citizen leader. These images were widely reproduced, making his face one of the most recognizable in America. Parson Weems's popular biography, first published in 1800, introduced apocryphal stories like the Cherry Tree Tale, further embedding Washington into the national consciousness as a figure of unwavering honesty. These cultural artifacts presented an idealized figure for a country in need of unifying heroes. Washington's lasting impact on American identity is profound. His farewell address of 1796, which warned against political parties and permanent foreign alliances, became a foundational text for American foreign policy for over a century. The naming of the national capital, countless towns, and the state of Washington itself permanently etched his name onto the map. Studies have shown that subsequent generations of Americans looked to his model of leadership and character as a national standard. He established foundational precedents for the peaceful transfer of power, a core principle of American democracy. His symbolic value, as one historian wrote, provided a moral compass for the nation, shaping ideals of civic duty and public service that continue to resonate. This enduring legacy of moral leadership was built upon the foundation of a stable personal life, which began with his marriage. Our journey into the life of George Washington, the father of the United States, comes to an end. From his Virginia childhood and education to his first military experiences and appointment as commander, his path was one of constant challenge. We explored early campaigns and setbacks, the turning point at Trenton, and the winter of suffering that tested his resolve. His military reorganization, the crucial French alliance and strategy, and the decisive Yorktown campaign shaped the nation's birth. Washington's role in post-war challenges, presiding over the convention, and his unanimous election established a new government. We examined his efforts in establishing presidential traditions, economic foundations, and navigating foreign policy challenges. The Whiskey Rebellion crisis and rising political divisions highlighted the fragility of the new republic. His famous farewell address offered lasting wisdom. We also touched upon his final years at Mount Vernon, his death and national mourning, and an analysis of his leadership qualities. The slavery controversy, his marriage and family life, and his physical presence and demeanor were also part of his complex story. His private interests and passions, revolutionary warfare tactics, and the use of intelligence and espionage played significant roles. Furthermore, his commitment to the balance of powers and national unity priority underpinned his vision. Subscribe to our channel to not miss new episodes. See you in the next episodes.